Auzubillahiminash-shaytanir-rajim. Bismillahir-rahmanir-rahim. Assalamu-alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Today we are going to study Preface, which is from Jeffrey Lang's book Struggling to Surrender, and it is part of VII, Book 7. The introduction first. This is an extract of the preface of a book titled Struggling to Surrender by Jeffrey Lang. It is a very personal account of one man's search for Allah and the true meaning of life. Every human being thinks about the meaning of life, and this is Jeffrey Lang's search for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Dr. Lang was brought up as a Catholic, which is a sect of Christianity, and educated in a Roman Catholic school. However, one day he found his religious beliefs could no longer provide satisfactory answers to his questions. So when he asked questions about God and our role or our position with reference to God, he was not able to get the answers that would satisfy him by his religious beliefs. So his quest began. So what happened? That he started searching for the answers to his questions. So how did he begin his quest? Reason. Reason means intellect. So he first thought about his questions logically. And then agnosticism. Thinking that we cannot find out about God. We cannot know about God. Then atheism. Atheism means that a person believes that there is no God. And finally, coincidence. Coincidence means something that happens by chance. So what happened by chance? That he encountered with a Muslim student in one of his classes. So he met a Muslim student in one of his classes. That eventually led to his conversion. Finally. So he became a Muslim because he interacted with that Muslim student. He was not looking for a religion. So he was actually looking for the answers to his questions. He was not in search of any religion, and he did not have this idea in his mind that he's going to convert and become a member of some other religion. Nevertheless, which means in spite of the fact that he was not in search of any religion, he started reading the Quran, but with a strong prejudice. He did not believe that this book was sent by God or it was a true holy book. He did not believe that. He had a strong bias against it. He did not believe that it was something holy and important and sent by God. You cannot simply read the Quran, not if you take it seriously. You either have surrendered to it already or you fight it. So when you read Quran, you have two stances. Either you have surrendered to it and you have submitted yourself to it and you understand that it's a book sent by God, and that's how you read, and therefore you understand what is in it. And the other stance is that you fight it. You are against the book and you read to fight with it. It attacks tenaciously. So it attacks in a determined manner. It attacks directly, personally. It debates. It criticizes. It shames. And it challenges the beliefs of a person. From the outset, it draws the line of battle. Outset, what does that mean? It means from the beginning. From the beginning, it draws the line of battle. And I was on the other side. So I was fighting. So Jeffrey is saying that I was fighting with it. Thus, he found himself in an interesting battle. I was at a severe disadvantage. So he was not winning the battle. He was losing the battle. He was at a disadvantage. For it became clear that the author knew me better than I knew myself. So who is the author? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, knows all of us better than we know ourselves. It was as if the author was reading his mind. Every night he would make up certain questions and objections, but would find the answer in his next readings as he continued his readings in the accepted order. The Quran was always way ahead of my thinking. This is his own words. It was erasing barriers. It was removing the barriers that were stopping him from becoming a Muslim. I had built years ago. So he had built several barriers against Islam, and he had his own objections and questions against it. And when he was reading Quran, these objections were erased. They were finished. They vanished because of what he read in the Quran. So he had built these barriers years ago and was addressing my queries. So whatever questions were in his mind, Quran was addressing those queries. He fought vigorously with objections and questions, but it was apparent that he was losing the battle. So he was fighting strongly, and he had prepared questions and objections to fight with Quran, but it was very obvious, it was very clear that he was losing the battle. I was being led, working my way into a corner that contained only one choice. And when he was going through that experience, he was moving towards a corner, you can say, and that corner actually means that he had no other choice but to accept Islam. Dr. Lang is currently an associate professor in the Department of Mathematics at the University of Kansas. He converted to Islam in the early 1980s. Now, this is the introduction to the preface that we are going to read. What is a preface? A preface is like an introduction of a book. Like this was an introduction to the preface that we are going to study. And the preface is the introduction to a book. And which book are we talking about here? It is Struggling to Surrender, written by Jeffrey Lang. Let's start. Why did you become a Muslim? Asked one of my two interrogators. Now, who are these interrogators? These are his daughters. What answer would their innocence comprehend? Now, when they asked this innocent question, he was thinking that how should I explain this to my daughters who are very innocent, and what should I say that they will understand? Both gazed up at me dispassionately. So they were looking at him, and they wanted a rational, logical answer from him, as if they had all eternity to wait for an explanation. So they were patiently waiting for his answer, and it seemed that they had unending time. So they can sit there and wait for the answer and try to understand the explanation for as long as possible. Maybe they were not meant to understand, but only to ask. And then he was thinking that maybe they don't want the answer. This is the answer that I have to discover for myself. To initiate the process of self-examination. So actually, their question started a self-examination in his mind and in his heart. No, I thought. Their question was more personal than that. I remember when I asked my own father why he had become a Catholic. It was not due to curiosity alone, but a result of my own search for self-definition. So he wanted to know, who am I and why am I a Catholic? So this self-discovery or self-definition, understanding who I am, that was the impetus, or that is why he initiated that question or asked that question from his father. When I became a Muslim, I did not consider how many choices I was making, not just for myself, but for my 3 children and their descendants. So 2 of his daughters were asking these questions, but he had 3 children. And now he was thinking that I made this decision of becoming a Muslim. I made this decision not just for myself, but for my whole family, my children and their descendants as well. Of course, they needed to know why I made the decision, because it had been made for them as well. And they would have to come to terms with it for the rest of their life. So they also had to adjust with the situation that they had converted to Islam. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said of his youngest daughter, Fatima is part of me and I am part of her. Her happiness is my happiness and her pain is my pain. A father finds special fulfillment in this relationship with his children. They complement and counterbalance him because he sees the completion of himself in their personalities. So this relationship of a father with his children is unique and they complete one another. They are part of one another. Why did you become a Muslim? Holds an entirely different significance for me when it comes from my children. For it originates in me. So he is saying that question starts from me. And that question is not just coming from my daughters. It is coming from me. It is my completely voice in its still, untainted truthfulness cross-examining me. So he's thinking that this question completes me. And this question is pure and truthful question, and they are cross-examining me to discover themselves, to define themselves, and this is helping him to reflect on his decision as well. I explained it to them briefly, that is in a very short way, and as well as I could, but not in a way that finalized the matter, as I wanted to be sure the door was left open for further inquiry. So he wanted them to have this question continuously with them so that they keep on reflecting and self-examining themselves. So he answered their question as well as he could, but he also tried to let the question alive in their hearts and minds. Their question is the impetus behind this book. So Jeffrey Lang wrote Struggling to Surrender as a result of their question. So their question became a motivation to write this book, which began as nightly reflections on their question. So now how did he begin thinking about this book? He kept on reflecting on the question that the daughters had asked. Thus, this is no way an authoritative book on Islam in the United States. The work before you might be best described as my experience of or reaction to Islam, something like a diary or personal journal that will most likely be of interest to a certain type of audience. So he's saying that this is not an authoritative book on Islam in the United States. This is my personal reflection, like my personal journal that I'm sharing with others, and only certain type of people would enjoy reading it. As I could not include every personal reflection or question I have ever had, I confined myself to topics that seemed to be of general concern to converts. So the people who convert to Islam, what are their general issues or problems or their worries? So he focused his attention to only those reflections. The first two chapters are reflections on becoming a Muslim. The first chapter highlights the decision to convert, and the second focuses on the part played by the Quran. Although I have done my best to interpret these topics, there is so much contained within them that still remains a mystery to me. So he himself is thinking that this is a mystery to me, that what helped me or what moved me towards making this decision. The last three chapters, which form the major part of this work, are in reality an appendix to these subjects. Now, what is an appendix? It is a section or table of subsidiary matter at the end of a book or document. So preface is in the beginning and it introduces the subject of the book and what is written in the book. And the appendix is a supplementary part of the book which is at the end of it. They deal with the difficulties encountered after conversion and the struggle to participate in Muslim community life. So the last 3 chapters deal with the problems that he faced when he became a Muslim and how did he become part of the Muslim community. The initial recipients of the revelation were the inhabitants of 7th century Arabia. So recipients means the people who receive revelation is the revelation of Quran to the Prophet. When they heard it recited in their own tongue, its style was so sublime and its language so powerful, as the Quran points out, even the disbeliever found its effect spellbinding magic. So it was spellbinding, that they were spellbound, they were impressed, they were awe-inspired when they heard what was written in the Quran. The Arab of that era did not have to struggle to translate the images he was hearing into categories of thought to which he could relate. So he could easily understand what was said, and the images also they could understand. So they did not have to translate it into any other thing. When the Quran teaches us to ask Allah to show us the straight path, the modern reader may understand this to refer to the delicate and subtle distinction between truly serving Allah and someone or something else. So the straight path, what would that mean to us in the modern time? The modern reader will think that this is a very slight, very minute difference between truly serving Allah and serving others or something else, or praying to somebody else, or associating some partner with Allah. So he would understand that there is a slight difference between just obeying to Allah and obeying others. But to the desert traveler of the 7th century, it provoked a psychological reflex. It aroused or produced a reflex or reaction to it. And what was that? Because in his travels, knowledge of the straight path was a matter of life and death. Because in the desert, there are no landmarks. They are just dunes of sand. And when there is a desert storm, even the dunes change their shape and their outline. So all the landmarks are erased and new landmarks are created. So it is very difficult to know the straight path in the desert. So to them, knowing the straight path is the matter of life and death. And if it is a matter of life and death, of course they understand the importance of the straight path as well. Then you need most to know that Allah is with you, that He hears you, He confirms it. So when you want that attachment or closeness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Baqarah in ayah number 186, when my servants ask thee concerning me, I am indeed close to them. I listen to the prayer of every suppliant, then He calleth on me. Let them also with a will listen to my call and believe in me, that they may walk in the straight way. And another ayah, when you doubt, He assures you that there is always hope. Say, O my servant, who have transgressed against their souls, despair not. That means do not worry of the mercy of Allah, for Allah forgives all sins, for He is oft forgiving, most merciful. Let's look at the ayahs in Arabic. وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي أَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ. And when my servants ask you, O Muhammad, concerning me, indeed I am near. أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِي إِذَا دَعَانِ. I respond to the invocation of the supplicant when he calls upon me. So when we pray to Allah, when we make dua to Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala listens to it and He responds to it. فَلْيَسْتَجِيبُوا لِي. and believe in me that they may be rightly guided. That is the last part. وَلْيُؤْمِنُوا بِي لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْشُدُونَ, and believe in me and that they may be rightly guided. And the Ani فَلْيَسْتَجِيبُوا means, so let them respond to me. And this is another ayah, ayah number 53 from Surah Zumar. قُلْ يَا عِبَادِ الَّذِينَ أَسْرَفُوا, so, O my servants who have transgressed, who have broken the laws, who have worked against themselves, عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ, against themselves by sinning, لَا تَقْنَطُوا, do not despair, مِنْ رَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ, of the mercy of Allah. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَغْفِرُ الذُّنُوبَ جَمِيعًا, Allah, indeed Allah forgives all sins. إِنَّهُ هُوَ الْغَفُورُ الرَّحِيمُ, indeed it is He who is the forgiving and the merciful. Doubt can lead to rejection of faith, the more if it is prohibited. So you should not doubt in Allah's teachings, and we should not doubt what He has told us in the Quran. But it can also lead to deeper and richer faith. So this was doubt. Why did we become Muslim? So when you have this doubt, it is not a very, you can say, a positive response to Quran and faith. But sometimes when you have such a question, that also helps you to deepen your faith and make it richer, especially if it is given room to do battle with itself. So you battle with yourself and then with the words of the Quran, and that's how you reach the right conclusion. I've been fighting with myself for some time over whether or not I should publish this book. My hesitation was not due to any fear of causing controversy, but rather because of its very personal character. Now, because this book was like his personal journal, his own reflections, that is why he was in doubt that whether I should publish this book or not. And he did not fear that it is going to create any controversy or any differences. This book then represents my very small contribution to the growth of Islam in the United States. Like Muslim writers of old, I attribute what is good therein to the mercy and glory of God. Now he is attributing it. It means that he thinks that whatever good he has written in the book and whatever benefits people would derive from his writing, that is because of the mercy and glory of God. And seek His forgiveness for that which is not. And he's asking for Allah's forgiveness for those parts of the book that he thinks are useless or are not going to benefit other Muslims. That's all for today. Jazakallah. See you next time. Allah Hafiz.